I've been caught, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been taught, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been broken, but I'm keeping on check.
Good afternoon, good evening. This is Dove Tasman, and you're back on Equal Footing. We did a number of shows towards the end of 2023 that were more social and political in nature, inspired by the horrific events of October 7th, and prior to that, the war in the Ukraine. We've kind of gone back to our roots over the last few weeks, starting this new year, touching on the very intimate, the very personal, the stuff that we don't know who to talk to about. Sometimes our faith seems to abandon us when we most need it. The moments in life where we feel at sea and we feel discombobulated, in pain. When we're suffering, sometimes it's hard to remember to reach out to Hashem. It feels like nothing makes sense. Last week, we touched on substance abuse addiction and recovery for young adults. That was a raw and beautiful show. Encourage folks to look at that online if you're dealing with that or if you have a loved one who is. This week, we're dealing with another very painful topic of miscarriage. The loss of a willing pregnancy. When you have such joy to look forward to, often, or sometimes accidental, most often the product of great intentionality and love. And that getting suddenly torn away is something that affects an extraordinarily high number of couples, women. Over 50% of women in their lifetimes will experience miscarriage. Many don't know. Sometimes it's so early you didn't even know you were pregnant. But 1 in 4 known pregnancies end in miscarriage. You heard me right. And if you think that's because we're including global statistics from the emerging world, that affects it a little bit. But even in Western advanced societies, it's close to 1 in 5. 1 in 5 times that you get pregnant, and you know you're pregnant, I should say, that there's fetal demise. There's the spontaneous abortion. It's a topic that is not as addressed as I think it should be in the religious world. How, quote unquote, should we cope with this loss? It's also a topic that is most often covered in women's forums. And of course, the immediate, salient, and most painful effect is felt by the mother. But it's something that's navigated by the couple where applicable. We have 3 brave women on tonight to talk about their personal journeys through miscarriage and to give us words of wisdom, both from a secular perspective and a Jewish perspective. In no particular order, I'm going to introduce Danielle Kohler. Danielle is a seasoned marketing leader. She lives in the New York area. She has over 20 years of general management and marketing expertise. Her husband has been for many years a stay-at-home dad. Danielle, outside the marketing realm, is on the path to becoming a certified love, sex, and relationships coach. She's also a competition cheerleading coach and the curator of a wonderful Instagram page that I've had a chance to look at prior to the show called Sexy Plant Hoe. Hoe spelled H-O-E. And you'll see there that she's very passionate about plants and gardening. She's here, hopefully, not for the last time, but for the first time here on Equal Footing. Danielle, welcome.
Thank you for having me on your show.
There you are.
There I am.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
And now I'm going to introduce Michelle Gottlieb. Michelle is the loving Jewish mama of a 25-year-old, a 22-year-old, and a 15-year-old. She splits her time between Park City, Utah, and New York City. And I know this is in her bio just to win over my heart. She has 20 years of rooting for the Boston Red Sox, like me, because she's originally from Boston. Michelle is married to a college sweetheart who she met in college at Columbia University, where she received a degree in environmental sciences. And she also has a master's in environmental management from Yale. She's worked in the environmental field for her entire career until her most recent chapter, where she's leaning in to become a leadership and executive coach. So like Danielle, making a beautiful life expansion and transition. Michelle is Jewish. She identifies as a Reform Jew, but she can hold her own, and especially with her brother and sister-in-law who in fact live in Israel and are both Shuva. Michelle, welcome to Equal Footing, also for the first time, and I hope not the last time.
Thanks so much for having me here. I'm excited to talk to you all, even though this is a tough subject to hold.
Oh, Leah, we have 3 first-time guests tonight. That's nice. I want to introduce Dr. Amy Barron. Dr. Barron is the founder and executive director of the I Was Supposed to Have a Baby Foundation. She provides a warm and nurturing space there for those going through infertility, pregnancy loss, infant loss, surrogacy, and adoption. She works broadly with the Jewish community. The I Was Supposed to Have a Baby organization is a nonprofit that utilizes social platforms to support Jewish individuals and families struggling to have a child, offering a modern solution to an age-old problem. Dr. Barron was formerly the Director of Innovation and Growth at Nahama Comfort. She's also worked as an attending pediatrician in the newborn nursery and neonatal intensive care unit at St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital before taking a leave of absence after her 3rd miscarriage. Dr. Barron lives in the New York area with her husband and children. Dr. Barron, welcome to Equal Footing.
Thank you so much for having me. Michelle, it seems we're going to have to talk about Boston sports teams a little bit. We'll probably do that offline later.
Dr. Barron, I want to start with you, and I mentioned one stat out of the box, and I was shocked in doing the pre-game research here how common miscarriage is. What are the factors around that, and why such a big difference between known and unknown pregnancies in terms of miscarriage?
So I think we need to start with the premise that miscarriage is something, as you said, the statistics are staggering. 1 in 4 pregnancies, not 1 in 4 women or 1 in 4 couples. I want to just emphasize that first because it really bears notice. We need to take notice of this, which means that this is happening to either people that we know in our lives or it's happening to ourselves. And so which means that this is not only a Jewish problem, this is a human problem, as you've made reference to. And so I think that the pieces to think about are that there are certainly miscarriages. Most miscarriages happen in the first trimester, and often those are chromosomal disorders, which means that the babies didn't have what we call normal, so to speak, chromosomes, and therefore would never go on to lead fruitful, healthy lives. And so, as we like to say, nature takes care of itself and miscarriage happens. And when you talk about known versus unknown miscarriage, I think many of these miscarriages even happen before one would ordinarily expect their period. And so therefore, that number, rises or falls depending on when you're looking at the moment of miscarriage.
Yeah, and I'm in uncharted territory for me intellectually here, Dr. Barron, but I understand that as it's defined, miscarriage is the loss of a pregnancy during the first 23 weeks. And afterwards, there's the possibility of a premature birth, and so that's a different matter. So we're talking here about loss relatively early, either first or second trimester. Is that right?
Exactly. Look, depending on whose definition you use, some people say that miscarriage strictly is anything less than 20 weeks. 23 weeks is the point of viability. So if a baby was born at 23 weeks, often that baby would be taken to the NICU as opposed to not being given a chance to be alive. But after any loss post, this fuzzy line, 23 weeks, any loss after that, from that point to the point of where someone would be due, is called a stillbirth.
And Dr. Barron, as I understand it, the vast majority of miscarriages in the first 12 weeks, and the most common danger zone where there's a known pregnancy is kind of the 5 to 8 week period. If I understand the research correctly, if not, please do correct me. I'm wondering, to start to get into the physical and emotional and psychological impact, if in your view, working with mothers and couples, it's in a sense, I'm struggling for the right word, but easier when there's the loss of the fetus very early, or do you feel that it's once there's a known pregnancy, it's really the same kind of recovery and coping process for the parents?
Dov, I love the fact that you asked this question. I in my line of work, when I deal with people all across the Jewish community and with all different kinds of fertility challenges, we don't talk about gradations of pain, of your pain is worse, your pain is less, mine is more. Pain is pain is pain is pain. I would venture to say, and I say this with personal experience and from working with thousands of people, from the moment that someone gets a positive pregnancy test, their mind is already spinning. They're hoping, they're dreaming, they're planning. Is it going to be a boy or a girl? Am I going to name after this one or name after that one? Oh, do we need a new car? Do we need a new house? What am I thinking about in terms of, who am I going to, for Pesach, because the baby is going to be born hopefully around Passover time. Immediately there is this shift in the thinking, and you're just envisioning your future with this child, even though it's only a couple of cells at that moment. And so is there, when, God forbid, if someone would lose a baby at the point that it's right before delivery, at that stillbirth point, it's a baby that might be 5, 6, 7 pounds that is fully formed and doesn't have a heartbeat, as opposed to an earlier loss like you were describing, where it's still something that is almost unimaginable, cells or maybe just starting to be formed. There is no comparison. But in terms of the parent's experience of wanting a child and dreaming about that child's place in their lives, it changes immediately upon that positive pregnancy test.
And we're going to need to take our first break in a moment, and afterwards, Michelle and Danielle, I'm going to ask you to tell your personal journeys. I do feel it's fair to share, because I'm finding myself already quite emotional during this show, more so than I think in any show to date. That in our family, we just went through this as well, meaning really just. We were going to cover a different topic this week on air and made a programming shift as a result of our own miscarriage. And I'm going to actually ask my partner on air and my partner in life, Leah, to be a part of these next couple of segments and asking questions, in part so I can have a little bit of an emotional break, and maybe we'll divide and conquer. I want to give out the number to call or to text in a question or comment here. We'd love to hear about your experiences, either on air live. You can say your name or be anonymous, or you can text or WhatsApp. There are two different numbers. So here's the number to call. We are live on air, 718-303-9090. That's 718-303-9090. If you call, please be patient because we're not in studio tonight. You can probably tell from the sound quality, and so we do. It takes a little bit of time sometimes for our radio engineer to pick up the call. So just be patient. We'll get to you if you call and let it ring until we pick you up. If you want to text or WhatsApp in a question or comment to our wonderful guests, Danielle Kohler, Michelle Gottlieb, and Dr. Amy Barron, you can do so by texting or WhatsApping to a different number, 917-428-4062. That's 917-428-4062. And we'll be right back on Equal Footing.
You'd be 13, I'd be 35. Going to find a place for us to hide. Be together but alone as the need for it has grown. You'd be 13, I'd be 35.
Equal Footing is about addressing the tough stuff. And we have sponsors that do just that for this show and on this network. Bravo to Manhattan Medical. Manhattan Medical Associates deals with a difficult subject that affects the emotional and physical well-being of men and couples, and that's erectile dysfunction. ED is nothing to be ashamed about. It affects 2/3 of men in their lifetimes. Manhattan Medical works within and without the Jewish community, and you don't have to be in Manhattan or even in the New York area. Anywhere in the United States, you can get a free teleconsult with Manhattan Medical about their ED therapy, but only if you mention that you heard about it on the Equal Footing radio show or on the Dove Tusman show. But here's what I'm going to tell you about their ED therapy before I give you the number. It is painless. It is non-invasive, and it is surgery-free, and it is enduring, and it does not, I repeat, not involve those expensive blue pills. A lot of people can't take the standard remedies for erectile dysfunction because they have comorbidities, and they can't withstand the side effects. Manhattan Medical's Gains Wave therapy for ED has no side effects. Okay, I promise you the number. Again, you can get a $250 value, a free consultation, teleconsult if you're not in the New York area, from anywhere in the United States by calling the following number, 888-ED-CURE-9. That's 888-332-8739. One more time, for Manhattan Medical's Gains Wave therapy for erectile dysfunction. Operators are standing by. Call 888-ED-CURE-9 or 888-332-8739.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been told, but I'm keeping on.
All right, you're back on Equal Footing. We called tonight's program on our social media blast Silent Tears. It's about miscarriage. We called it that because it's a topic that most people suffer through without talking about. I think that's the case in our research. Before we go to you, Michelle and Danielle, Dr. Barron, do I have that right? Is this something that people generally suffer through alone, or is it more common to know that there's a support group out there, reach out to your rabbi or rebbitzin or what have you?
You have it absolutely right, unfortunately, Dove. And I'm working very hard to try to change that, but you do have it right. And I think specifically in the Jewish community, but I want to say overall, there is this notion, because we know of the statistics of miscarriage, that most miscarriages happen, if they're going to happen, they would happen before the end of the first trimester. And so often people will have this adage, they'll say, oh, I'm not going to share anything because I don't want to have to undo the positive news that I'm sharing with people. So I'm going to wait until I'm showing, wait until after that first trimester, and then things will be safe, and then I'll share about the pregnancy. And so what ends up happening is people go through this horrific experience where, as I said before, they were dreaming, they were hoping, they were planning, and all of those pieces are now gone. And then it's really awkward to share with people, well, by the way, I was pregnant, but now I'm not, and now I need you to support me, but I never told you that I was actually in that space to begin with.
You know, I
it's
didn't think
really
of that.
hard.
It's like, it's difficult. It's obviously difficult if you said it and then you have to unsay it. But it's also perhaps even more difficult if you haven't said it at all, because then it's like you need the support and help, but people may not even have understood the arc of the emotion. Michelle, I want to ask you a little bit about your personal experience. Just tell us about your miscarriage journey.
Sure, and I'm going back a little bit in the past here, and it's interesting to think back to this because it's been a while. I've had 2 miscarriages, and one was before I had any children, and I would say that was an extremely difficult, emotionally wrenching experience because I didn't even know would I ever be able to have a child, and that was just, it was so painful. I lost a pregnancy at about 9 weeks, and I had told some people and not other people, and I just remember that wrenching experience. All of the things Dr. Barron talked about, the hopes, the dreams. I had tried and tried for a long time to get pregnant, finally did, and then lost the pregnancy, and it was so painful. I felt so alone, and my experience in the medical community when I went, to confirm what was happening, it was so clinical, so cold. There was no compassion, and I think that was part of the hardest part of the journey. I don't know what people experience today. I kind of hoped I would hear from you, Dr. Barron, and from others that there's a lot more support, a lot more people talking about it, because my experience is so distant. This first miscarriage was over 26 years ago, but it doesn't seem as if maybe that much has changed. So, so it was just, I felt so alone, even with my partner. I don't think he knew how to navigate it with me. It was like, to him, I think the pregnancy wasn't as real as it was for me. So there was like a disconnect between the two of us. Even though he had hopes and dreams, I think mine were, at least at the time, more real and more present. The second miscarriage, do you want me to talk about that really quickly? The second miscarriage was after I already had 2 children. They were like 6 and 8 at the time, or 5 and 7. So it was a very different experience, but yet still just as wrenching because I didn't feel comfortable talking with my children about it. And that's another disconnect. Like, this is something that should have been, I should have been able to talk with my family openly. They were old enough probably to understand, yet we live in such a vacuum where this wasn't comfortable. And I remember the day we were on vacation, the day after the miscarriage, I remember going to an amusement park with them in New England and suffering through it. Like, I should have been able to rest and rejuvenate and talk to my family. And it was so taboo. And we need to be able to connect with each other and support each other in a different way around this issue.
Michelle, I want to ask you, I hope I won't offend you with this. I want to ask you a difficult question. Based on the research, and just the natural emotional response, it seems that a lot of, even though chromosomal abnormalities are to blame for the vast majority of, certainly of our first trimester miscarriages, if not in general, a lot of mothers blame themselves, and I think couples end up having a lot of issues around this as well, where it can cause distance or a feeling, and people become depressed and so forth. Did you have any of that? Does that resonate at all? Did you think, what could I have done better?
Oh, certainly. I definitely blamed myself and wondered what I could have done better. I was actively, especially the first time around, I was, doing all of this, consulting Dr. Google, with all kinds of things I could have been doing. Was I supposed to be taking aspirin? Did I need more progesterone? Was I eating right? Was I, I'm in the environmental field. What kind of exposures was I facing? There was a lot of, even though I knew, through my education, I knew what the research was on the frequency of miscarriages. I was taking the hit. I was taking the blame, and it added to my burden of suffering, I think, around this.
Dr. Barron, is that a common trauma response? And what would you tell women that are feeling that are having that feeling? What could I have done differently? It's my fault.
It is absolutely a common response. I mean, the miscarriage is happening in our own bodies. So, of course, we feel responsible. We feel that we are to blame. Did I eat something wrong? Did I move differently? Did I carry something heavy? Maybe I slept wrong. Maybe I, inhaled something. We place the responsibility on ourselves. And yet, as I told everyone earlier, we know that the research shows that most miscarriages happen because of nothing that anyone has done. It's a genetic problem, it's a chromosomal problem, it's an anatomical problem, or it's some interplay between the hormones and the different pieces in the woman's body that are rejecting it that are no fault of the woman herself. So, is this common? Absolutely. Do we know that it's not the case? Absolutely. Will women still blame themselves? Unfortunately, absolutely.
Danielle, what was your experience in this painful journey, and did that last question and answer resonate with you?
It did. I had a miscarriage after I had a daughter. She was 3 at the time, and we had tried for a while to get pregnant again, and so obviously there was a lot of excitement. We lost the baby at 10 weeks, and to the last statement, I did of course blame myself. I had taken medicine for a yeast infection and swore that I must have done something because of that. But I had they had done a DNA test because I was over 35 at the time. So they do that test. I'm not sure if they did it at 7 weeks or 8 weeks or something like that. But they did give me the results after, which showed that there was a chromosomal problem with the baby. So it made sense, but so that's great, right? There's science and more information now, that helps us feel a little bit less like it's something that we did. So yeah, that was really helpful for me.
I didn't know that test existed. I missed that in the pregame research. That's really interesting. We're going to need to take our next break in a moment, but very quickly, Danielle and Michelle, starting with you, Danielle, is this still an open wound? Is this still something that you think about or that you grieve about? Or have you, I don't know how to put it, have you gotten over it?
Yes, it's something I still grieve about. for sure. It's something I still grieve about. I also grieve because then I feel like I can't remember. I'll be like, oh, I can't remember when the baby was supposed to be due, or when would the baby's birthday have been, and then I feel guilty that I don't remember details like that either. So it's not something I think about all the time, but certainly it crosses my mind.
Yeah, it's interesting how much it fades, but then when I encounter somebody who's experiencing it, it comes back to the surface, and I feel, of course, great empathy for somebody who's experiencing it, and it all comes back to the surface. But there's this strange flip side. I don't know if other people experience it when I think about the children that are in my life now, and I think these beautiful children wouldn't be here. And so there's that kind of beautiful other side. And of course I grieve the loss of those pregnancies that weren't sustained, but I cherish the humans that came into my life, and I can't imagine my life without them. So that is what I kind of hold on to. And as time passes, and for anybody who's in the middle of this, time, of course, like you always experience, time certainly heals.
Amen. We'll be right back on Equal Footing with Dr. Amy Barron, Danielle Kohler, and Michelle Gottlieb talking about miscarriage.
Me cuesta abrir los ojos y lo hago poco a poco, no sea que aún te encuentre cerca. Me guardo tu recuerdo como el mejor secreto, qué dulce fue tenerte dentro. Hay un trozo de luz en esta...
Equal Footing with Dove Tusman is sponsored by MDCS Dermatology, your experts in skincare. With 2 Manhattan locations and 4 offices in Long Island, including Plainview and Commack, the dermatologists and skincare surgeons at MDCS are proud to be affiliated with the Albert Einstein College of Medicine and New York Presbyterian Hospital. So schedule your next skin exam in one of MDCS's convenient New York area locations. To make an appointment, go to www.mdcs.live or call 212-661-DERM. That's 212-661-3376. You could even schedule a virtual video visit with MDCS's board-certified dermatologists from the comfort and safety of your own home. So go to www.mdcs.live or call 212-661-3376. And don't forget to mention Equal Footing for 15% off all cosmetic procedures.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on to. I've been told, but I'm keeping on to.
Right, our theme song is no time more appropriate than around tonight's topic of just keeping on after tragedy and through pain. I want to stay with you, Michelle and Danielle, for a moment, and then if you don't mind, Dr. Barron, I want to give you a heads up, not to take you blindsided. If you'd be willing to open up about your own story, your own journey through miscarriage, and now you're such a resource for so many other women, and as I understand it came directly from personal experience. So I would like to hear about that as well. Michelle, we already have a couple of listeners that have asked this question, and we already had it as well in a related form as we thought about this show, going towards the health of the relationship with your husband. And did your miscarriages have any temporary or enduring negative impact in your relationship? And if so, how did you navigate that?
I don't think there was a negative impact in the long term, but I do think navigating especially with the first miscarriage, I think the short-term impacts it was a bumpy time. I think that my partner at the time, my husband, didn't know how to support me, how to be there for me. I was in such pain, such emotional turmoil. I just wanted that pregnancy back. I was suffering so much emotionally. We had tried so hard to get pregnant, then we couldn't try again. Then it took us a long, long time to get pregnant afterwards. And I think we just weren't there together as emotionally as partners. And I just think maybe today we would have been in a more communicative place, but at the time I felt like I needed to bear this myself. Like this was like my problem as a future mother or as a woman, and he was a little bit peripheral to it. And I think now, today, where we are as partners, it would have been a much different story, but being young and not quite as connected as we are now, I felt very alone in our relationship. It was a bumpy time, for sure.
Danielle, how about you? How did it affect the relationship with your husband?
Yeah. So earlier in the show, you mentioned that my husband is a stay-at-home dad. So as much as we was spoken about that, it's, you know, as a woman, we're planning and we're thinking about it and we're envisioning what it's going to be like with the baby here. For my husband, who, if I could say, wanted kids, wanted babies more than me, it was really emotional for him too. But he's like this strong, kind of, you know, alpha type. And so he wouldn't show, like now I know, but in the moment he was very strong for me. But now I know that he was leaving the room and going to the bathroom and crying himself, but he just wasn't doing that in front of me, because also I was kind of bratty about it, right? I felt like this was something I was going through and it was my body. And so I was frustrated with him when he would show emotion about it, because I was being a brat. And so it definitely affected both of us, for sure.
When we got the news in the hospital room a few days ago, I was trying to be really strong, and I wasn't quite succeeding. I was also breaking into tears here and there. And I remember what you just said really touched me, Danielle, because I felt like I was failing my partner in that moment, that I needed to be strong because she was dealing with it. And I know that, you know, you'll say if you don't want to answer this, but I'm wondering, Leah, if in that moment going to help other couples, did you need me either then or now or going forward to be less showing of that emotion so I can be a better, you know, kind of pillar of strength for you?
Thank you for making me be on air. No, I don't subscribe to the idea that men should be strong and not vulnerable. I don't think that's healthy at all. And I think a pregnancy loss, even though it's in a woman's body, affects the couple. And in our relationship, you have sometimes wanted children more than I have, and there's been times where I've wanted children more than you have, so there's always been this dance. But I think not showing your emotions wouldn't help me. It would make me wonder what your emotions were. And I think you deal with things in a way that's more apparent for everyone else, whereas I tend to deal with it in a way that's more internal. So we have different ways of showing emotion, and we both feel the same thing. And I wouldn't want my partner to be different.
Michelle, earlier you mentioned, pardon me if I'm not getting the details exactly right, but that right after the miscarriage, you guys found yourself in a theme park or something, and kind of, I don't know if you were purposely trying to like put it behind you as a family or not, but I actually toggle between that of like a really engaged emotional response and also wanting to just cope by compartmentalizing and just, putting it away and, pretending everything's fine. And Dr. Barron, I imagine you have some good advice for mothers and couples in terms of what is a healthy emotional response.
I wish I could actually give you a prescriptive answer to that, Dove. What I can say is I think exactly what Leah said, which is that there needs to be an understanding, there needs to be communication between the couple to make sure that each person is giving support to the other, because this is something that the two of you are going through together. It's not, someone lost a mother or someone lost a sibling. It's both of you lost a child. And so both of you need to support each other. However, everyone needs support in different ways, and everyone also grieves in different ways. And, some people may need to shut it all out and get out and go to theme parks and, get out and go to shul and go to synagogue and be surrounded by people. And others may think that that's absolutely absurd and could never even envision leaving their bed for days or weeks or whatever that is. I was actually in that latter category. My husband was the one who was out and going and doing, and I just shut the world out. There has to be, tuning into what you need, but also communicating and respecting what the other person needs as well.
Dr. Barron, I'm not going to ask you for halachic guidance. It's not the nature of tonight's program. It wouldn't be fair to you. Talk about, when does one become nida after miscarriage and the rituals around miscarriages before 30 days and after and so forth. There's a lot of interesting and soulful stuff there, but it's just not tonight's program. I do wonder, however, if you could give our Jewish listeners, and particularly our frum listeners, some kind of emotional, psychological guidance from a Jewish wisdom perspective. That's, as I understand it, kind of your core clientele, if you will, with the organization that you run. Is there kind of Jewish advice on how to respond to a miscarriage in the marriage?
I'm actually going to take your question and I'm going to flip it and say, what are the things that Jewish wisdom share or talk about that one should not do or should not say during a miscarriage or after a miscarriage? Because, and the reason I'm framing it in that way is because there is often the almost desire to try to explain why things have happened this way. So, the baby must have been sick. Hashem has a plan. Everything happens for a reason. You know that this would not have been what he would have wanted. There's a lot of, or there are better things that are coming. Just daven more, just pray more, take on another mitzvah, take on something else. There is this tendency to try to explain away tragedy, and using these platitudes. Sometimes people view it as, you don't have enough faith, you don't have enough bitachon, that Hashem has a plan for you, and this is what was supposed to happen. And I think that these are all interesting, kinds of inappropriate things to say to someone else when they're going through tragedy. What I would say instead is that those kinds of phrases, words, beliefs gives you personal comfort, if it feels better for you, if you somehow can make reason out of it by having this idea that Hashem has a plan, everything happens for a reason, that's something that you can hold yourself. But for someone to tell you that that's the way you should think about it is just very disarming, and it feels as if that the people who are doing that are not really hearing the pain and hearing the grief and wanting to sit with you as you're suffering. And so I always say these things are beautiful and nice. If they're meaningful to you, wonderful. If they're not, forget about it. And definitely don't say them to other people.
I'm going to make an executive decision here to take the blame from one of our sponsors, and I'm going to skip this last ad break and just continue here because I want to make sure to get to some listener questions as well. I asked before if you'd be willing to tell your personal story as well, Dr. Barron. Could you share that with our listenership?
Sure. I think all of us in the helping profession, we come to this because it's personal, and this is deeply personal for me. I had, I think it was Michelle who was talking about her struggle to get pregnant. So while I do have 5 children, thank God, we had our first very quickly, and we had 3+ years of trying to conceive our second with an early miscarriage in the middle of all that. And the only reason why I'm glossing over that piece is because that is actually not the bulk of my miscarriage story. That was an early miscarriage. It was a chromosomal abnormality. And then, thank goodness, from that moment on, getting pregnant was not my problem anymore. We had our second, then we had our third very quickly, and being in the modern Orthodox community, I thought, our family would be hopefully 4, 5, 6 children. I got pregnant again very quickly with our 4th, and I passed that early marker, that 8-week mark where I had lost the baby previously, and thought we were home clear. And you see, my voice is starting to shake a little bit because it still bothers me. I got to the 16-week ultrasound, and there was no heartbeat. And that exact story happened 3 other times in a row at either 16 or 17 weeks in the span of about 2.5 years. All of those babies were healthy. So the testing that you had referred to, thank you. The testing that we were talking about earlier, all of those babies were tested. They were all healthy babies. It was clear that there was something going on in my body that was rejecting these pregnancies, but no doctor could figure it out. We traveled all around the United States trying to get answers. There were lots of hypotheses, but no answers, unfortunately. After that last loss, I turned to my husband and said, I'm out. I can, and he was not pushing me ever, but I said, I can't do this anymore. I was, as I said to you before, I was that person who never left my bed until I was ready to leave and reemerge into society. I had quit my job. I was a pediatrician working in the hospital that you mentioned in the bio earlier. I quit my job because I couldn't take care of other people's babies anymore. Look, the end of the story, I have 5 children. After taking this time off and swearing that I would never try again because I was so broken physically and emotionally, we came to a point where we decided to try one more time with every possible thing that anyone had ever mentioned to us. Stand on your head every second Tuesday, eat gluten-free, don't leave your bed, all the medical science-based facts in addition to more of the alternative type things. I got pregnant again. Getting pregnant, not my problem. We got to the first ultrasound. There were 2 heartbeats. And I turned and said to the technician, I said, oh, good, there'll be 2 babies that die now. Because that was everything I knew up until at that point.
Yeah.
And those 2 heartbeats are 10 years old. And we do not know why that pregnancy worked, but I am grateful to be standing here and sharing the story with you.
I want to ask the panel a couple of questions that come from our listeners, and one of them is a direct extension of this last blessing of twins that you described, Dr. Barron. Several listeners have described their own experience in very difficult terms, being the most painful thing they went through in their life, or being an ongoing nightmare, being something they're still not over. There is a thematic around, one is a question, which is, does the rainbow baby, does the baby that comes after a miscarriage provide a lot of that healing? And this question comes from Ruchi, who, I'm not going to say the location for her request, who is recently married and has had 2 miscarriages, and they're still trying, and is experiencing a ton of pain, both her and her husband. They've not talked about either miscarriage with either of their families. And she just wants to know if when and if it finally does work, if things are going to heal, if they're going to feel better. And you know what? That's to any of the 3 of you.
I mean, I can speak only to my experience, but I can say that having had a miscarriage before I had a child, that, my first baby is 25 years old now, and she is a blessing that has been a blessing since the moment he was born. And I wish and hope that for you that baby will be the same for you, however that child comes into your life, whether through your body or through some other means, that you will find that love, and it will provide that healing for you. And I trust that will happen, and I believe it will. That healing will come and that love will come.
Amen. Dr. Barron, a listener asks from Muncie whether having had previous miscarriages dictates a higher probability for future miscarriages. That the answer seems to be obviously yes, but they've read conflicting information.
Well, it really depends on why the miscarriage has occurred. Well, speaking specifically about chromosomal abnormalities, we know that as someone gets older, the likelihood of a chromosomally abnormal embryo happening goes up. It increases. And so, if we're talking about someone who is at the age of 22 versus someone who's at the age of 40, then certainly that incidence increases. But other than that, beyond some other specific underlying medical diagnosis, which we can test for nowadays, and this person from Muncie should speak to their doctor if they've had multiple miscarriages already, unless there's something specifically defined. As far as I know, and again, I want to be very clear, the caveat, I am a pediatrician by training and do this work because of my personal experience. This is not my area of specialty, but from what I know, I do not believe that it increases the likelihood that you'll have another.
I just have a question before we end the show, because one of the things that has truly helped me is having these conversations and having this support through other women sharing their journeys. And I wanted to ask the three of you on with us here tonight whether you have had the same, whether you have had support in your lives from other women or people going through the same issues, and whether that has brought you a sense of comfort.
Danielle, maybe you could start.
Sure. I will say I definitely had support from family and people that were close to me that I had told. But the most surprising support, honestly, I had told my boss that I wasn't feeling great, and I hadn't told anyone that I was pregnant at work, but because I had to go leave for the day, I told him, and he and his wife actually, and we never spoke about it with any of my other coworkers or anyone else at work, but so he never talked about it, but they sent me flowers and they checked in on me. So it was actually really amazing to have somebody that was like a coworker or, in that type of environment versus just somebody who was my friend, really also support me. So it's great. I did have a lot of support. I was very lucky.
I didn't really have people in my life. I mean, family supported me a little bit, but I wound up in the early days of the internet, I think, finding a support group online that was incredibly helpful. And I had people from around the country who, only one of whom I actually met in person, that really supported me because they knew exactly what I was going through. And that online community was everything to me and really helped me through a hard time.
Dr. Barron, let's use Leia's last question, since we just have just a couple minutes, for you to maybe share your parting words and resources for listeners going through this issue.
Absolutely. What I can say, and what struck me so much about what Michelle was saying when she was telling her story earlier about how 26 years ago there was nothing, and even what she was saying just now about the early start of the internet and searching up groups. The world, Baruch Hashem, thank God, is very different. I mean, first of all, we are having this conversation now on live radio, openly talking about miscarriage. This would absolutely be unheard of even 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago at the maximum. And I think just the fact that we're able to have this conversation, the fact that Dov, you and Leia decided that this was a topic that you wanted to bring to your audience and that you felt comfortable doing so, is a tremendous testament to how far we've come. So,
how do people find you?
Yeah.
Thank you for that. How do people find you online?
So they can find us. We are the organization is called I Was Supposed to Have a Baby. It is Googleable. We are on all 5 major social media platforms, on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook. I answer every single message that comes in privately, personally, but people can also email if they want to share anything a little bit more lengthy. They can email us through our website. But besides sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, you're just going to be up on time. Go ahead.
There are a number of other resources in the Jewish community on pregnancy loss. So the place where I used to work is called Nechama Comfort. There's an organization based in Brooklyn, and they're all over the world, called Kinafayim. And
we're going to put both of those. Sorry for the interruption. We're going to put both of those in our show notes so everybody can see them. Dr. Barron, I want to thank you. Michelle Gottlieb, Danielle Kohler, thank you so much for opening up tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
If you're not inside me, I'll put my future in you. Wrap your fingers round